You ever grow up in a house where your very existence feels like an inconvenience? Because I did. From the outside, we looked like any other upper middle class family. Two successful parents, twin kids, a polished lawn, and photos of perfect birthdays on the mantle. But peel back that glossy layer, and it was always the Serena show. I was just the quiet background music no one noticed. We were twins, born minutes apart, same home, same school, same childhood, but never the same treatment. Serena, she was the golden girl. Gifted, disciplined, exceptional. Every report card was framed like it belonged in the Louvre. Tutors, summer science camps, custom math workbooks. I kid you not, she had a freaking SAT prep team before high school. Me, I like to draw, paint, play guitar, sketch weird little stories in the margins of my notebooks. They called it wasting time. My parents, both corporate execs, believed in structure, numbers, prestige. Art doesn't pay bills, my dad would grumble when he saw me sketching during dinner. That's not a career, Leo. That's a hobby. Every time I showed them something I made, a comic, a painting, even a song, they'd force a smile like I was showing them a crayon drawing in kindergarten. I stopped showing them after a while. They didn't just ignore it. They punished it. When Serena needed silence to study, my band practice got canceled. When she had a science competition, my small art exhibit at the community center got bumped. And the worst part, she knew it, and she loved it. See, Serena wasn't just their favorite. She was strategic. She'd say things like, Leo's just sensitive, or he is not serious about anything in front of them, always wrapped in fake concern, always playing the good daughter worried about her troubled twin, and they ate it up. I remember this one time, I was 15, my band got invited to play at a local indie gig. Small venue, nothing crazy, but it meant the world to me. I snuck out to play it, knowing full well my parents would never approve. When I got home, my dad was waiting. He didn't yell. He just walked into my room, picked up my vintage Les Paul, my pride and joy, and walked out with it. The next morning, it was gone. Never saw it again. That same night, they went through my drawers, took my phone, blocked all my social accounts, and started monitoring my online activity. I wasn't grounded. I was imprisoned. Meanwhile, Serena strutted around like she was queen regent of the house. Rules are rules, she said with a smirk. You can sit, just do whatever you want, Leo. Thing is, she could, always could. She used my punishment to her advantage, hosted her little study groups in peace, whispered about how she wished I'd get it together, made comments about my rebellious artist phase like I was some cliche. And the worst part, she actually resented me. Because for once, at that indie gig, I shined. There were maybe 50 people in that room, but they clapped. They listened. Someone from the local paper even wrote a blurb about me, called me a rising creative force. When that article hit, my parents didn't say a word. But Serena? She noticed, and she hated it. The next week at school, people started acting weird, distant. A few friends stopped texting me back. Someone whispered in art class, "Didn't you hear, Leo doesn't even do his own work?" I thought it was some dumb misunderstanding. Then Mark, one of my old bandmates, pulled me aside. "She is telling people, you buy your art," he said quietly. "That you steal money from your parents to fund your gigs. That you lie about commissions and use stock images. She even got proof, emails, receipts." I didn't want to believe it, but she is making it look real. And just like that, the foundation I had built for myself, small but sacred, began to crack. Because while I was trying to prove myself the hard way, Serena was working in the shadows. She didn't want attention. She wanted exclusive ownership of it. She wanted to be the only star in the Peterson galaxy, and any flicker from me was a threat. I confronted her, trembling. "You are lying. You know you are lying." She tilted her head, almost amused. "Leo, I don't need to lie," she said, with that polished smile. "You do that all by yourself." That moment, it broke something in me. Not just because of what she said, but because I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that if I told my parents, even showed them the truth, they'd still take her side. And I was right. Because what came next? That meeting with the principal, the gaslighting, the fake tears, the punishment. That was just the beginning of the end. You think it can't get worse once your own sister publicly humiliates you? It can. Because when the people who are supposed to protect you, your parents, your school, your community, all decide your voice doesn't matter, it doesn't just hurt, it erases you. The day the school called that meeting, I knew what was coming. My gut told me this wasn't a conversation. This was a trial, and the verdict had already been written. Principal Dunham sat at the head of the table, stone-faced. My parents were on either side of me, stiff and silent. Serena walked in with a tissue already in her hand, like she had been rehearsing tears in the mirror. She didn't just lie. She performed. She talked about how hard it was to watch her brother spiral, how she tried to support me, but was afraid of my erratic behavior, how she found emails on the family computer showing I was plagiarizing digital artwork, how she noticed cash going missing. She even hinted that I might be involved in things that would ruin the Peterson name. And the thing is, she looked concerned, convincing, a little broken. Oscar-worthy. I kept looking at my parents, waiting for them to interrupt. Defend me, believe me. They didn't. My mother started dabbing her eyes with a tissue of her own. My father reached across the table to squeeze Serena's hand. The principal nodded slowly, as if the decision was some kind of mercy. Then he said it. We believe it's in everyone's best interest if Leo takes a temporary leave of absence. Temporary. But I knew that word was a lie too. I looked around that room and realized something horrifying. It didn't matter what I said. I could scream the truth at the top of my lungs, and they'd still hear Serena's whispers louder. When I denied everything, when I told them the emails were fake, that she planted the evidence, they nodded politely, like I was delusional. My mother said, "We will work through this, sweetheart." But her eyes were full of something between embarrassment and pity. My father just shook his head. You need help, Leo. This obsession with victimhood, it's beneath you. Victimhood. I was being railroaded, cast as a threat to my own family's reputation, and I was still somehow expected to be calm, reasonable, quiet. That night I was ordered home immediately. And when we got there, I walked straight into my room, only to find my dad already inside, packing my things. No discussion, no hesitation, just folding shirts, zipping up my suitcase like I was being shipped off to military school. What are you doing? I asked, breath catching. You need to go, he said flatly. This house is not a place for instability and dishonesty. Your sister has a future to protect. I stood there, stunned. So I'm just being erased? He didn't even look up. You did this to yourself. I turned to my mom. She was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, face tight, silent, no fight, no softness, just complicity. I don't remember what I said after that. I think I begged. I think I cried. I do remember Serena walking past me in the hall with that same smug smirk she wore the night she stole my life. You should thank me, she said softly. Now you can finally live your bohemian fantasy. Far away from us. I nearly collapsed. That night I sat outside the house with my 2 bags and a plastic bin of my sketchbooks, unsure where to go. I didn't have friends left. I had no job, no plan, just the numb realization that the people who raised me didn't see me as a son, only as a stain. Then, Aunt Clara showed up. She pulled up in her little teal hatchback like some kind of battered angel. She must broken every traffic law in the state to get there so fast. Apparently, a distant cousin, someone who overheard the chaos, had called her in secret. She stormed into that house like fire on a mission. I didn't hear everything, but I caught pieces through the open front door. How dare you treat him like this? You always favored Serena, but this is beyond cruelty. My mom tried to interject. He's been manipulative. No, Clara snapped. He's different. And you never learned how to love different. She didn't just defend me. She burned the whole illusion to the ground, told them they were emotionally abusive, that kicking out a child, their child, based on rumors and optics was unforgivable. She even threatened legal action for child abandonment and emotional harm. I never seen anyone stand up for me like that. Not once in my entire life. She walked out, threw my stuff in her back seat, and said, "Let's go, kid." I didn't speak the whole ride, just stared out the window as we left the neighborhood. The only home I ever known. It didn't feel like escape. It felt like exile. But when we got to her modest apartment, filled with plants, books, and the scent of lavender and turpentine, she looked me in the eyes and said something no one else ever had. I believe you, Leo. I always have. And for the first time in weeks, I exhaled. It's strange how quiet freedom can feel. I spent years begging for space, to be seen, to be heard, to breathe, and now that I had it, I didn't know what to do with it. Aunt Clara's apartment was small, warm, a little chaotic in the best way. Half-finished canvases leaned against every wall, piles of books spilled off end tables. The kitchen smelled like paint thinner, coffee, and whatever herbal tea she was brewing that day. It wasn't polished, it wasn't curated, and for the first time in my life, I felt safe. But safety didn't erase the shame. When I returned to school after that leave of absence, I wasn't the same Leo. I didn't smile in the hallways. I didn't eat lunch with anyone. I stopped carrying my sketchbook, stopped playing guitar, stopped hoping. To most people, I was just that kid, the weird one who vanished for a while. Rumors had done their damage. Some said I was caught stealing. Others said I plagiarized my way into college applications. One even claimed I'd been sent to rehab. I didn't correct them. I didn't have the energy. I moved like a ghost through my senior year. But Clara refused to let me disappear entirely. Every evening she made me tea. We didn't always talk. Sometimes she just sat beside me while I stared at the wall. Other times she'd pull out an old sketchbook of mine, gently nudging it toward me. She never pushed, never pressured, just left the door cracked open. And eventually, I stepped through. I don't remember the first thing I drew, but I do remember the feeling like oxygen after a drowning. Like the world suddenly had color again. I started sketching quietly at first, then painting, then experimenting with digital tablets and free design software Clara found online. She called it my rescue mission. And she was right, because it saved me. I threw myself into my portfolio, not for my parents, not for school, not even for revenge, but because it was the one thing they couldn't take from me. My art was mine. Clara helped me apply to art schools, scouring scholarships with the determination of a mother bear. She even let me turn her guest room into a makeshift studio. I remember the day the email came in, full scholarship to a respected art program out of state. I didn't cry when my parents disowned me. But I cried then. College was a clean slate, a place where no one had heard of the Petersons. No one looked at me like I was defective. No one whispered lies behind my back. I was just Leo, the quiet kid who painted late into the night, who took on too many freelance commissions, who sometimes forgot to eat but never forgot his deadlines. I discovered digital animation in my sophomore year. It felt like lightning in my veins. There was something intoxicating about taking still images and giving them motion, breath, story. Suddenly, I wasn't just an artist. I was a world builder. My professors took notice. So did a few small indie clients. I started taking paid gigs, logos, motion graphics, short videos for startups. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the rent. More importantly, it paid with freedom. By the time I graduated, I had a portfolio that could speak louder than I ever could. Agencies started reaching out. Studios offered collaborations. I built a steady stream of freelance work, eventually going full-time. No commute, no boss, just me, my tablet, and the life I designed from scratch. And through it all, Aunt Clara stayed close. I called her every week, visited every holiday, even surprised her once with a small art grant in her name, the Clara Foundation, supporting creative kids from difficult homes. She cried so hard she forgot to finish her sentence. She was my real family. Not the ones who birthed me, the one who believed in me. I stopped wondering if my parents would reach out. It had been years, no calls, no letters, nothing. I figured they'd erased me completely, the troubled twin they never had. And I was okay with that. Until one day, they didn't just reach out. They asked me for something. But that's a story for another chapter. You never expect vindication to come with applause. For so long, I'd been creating in the shadows, quietly building a life on pixels and frames, freelancing for indie studios, animating characters that felt more real to me than my own family ever did. I didn't care about fame. I cared about the work. But then came the canvas of truth. It started as a therapy project, a visual diary of sorts, a short animated film about a boy, misunderstood and cast out by his family, who finds belonging not in blood but in brushstrokes. It wasn't subtle. I wasn't trying to be. It was the story of my life, wrapped in metaphor and color. I poured every memory into it. The shame, the loneliness, the betrayal, and the healing. Clara's warmth became a glowing character. My pain became a story arc. The final scene showed the boy walking alone through a snowy forest, only to find a cabin glowing with light and laughter, his chosen family waiting inside. I uploaded it quietly. Just a Vimeo link. No hashtags, no press release. And then, it exploded. First, a niche animation blog picked it up. Then a Reddit post went viral. Then film festivals came knocking. Within weeks it was everywhere. YouTube shorts, Twitter threads, classroom discussions. People saw themselves in it. Kids from broken homes, artists from cold families. Strangers messaged me saying, "Your film made me feel seen." Iced had never felt seen before. Then the speaking invites came. Art schools, conferences, even a panel on trauma and creativity. I gave one speech that really took off. I spoke about reclaiming your story from the people who distorted it. A clip of that speech went viral. Millions of views. Someone made a meme of it. I became a symbol I never asked to be, and that's when the past decided to find my number. The first missed call came on a Tuesday, a number I didn't recognize. Then another, then a voicemail. Leo, it's your father. We saw your video. You've done well for yourself. Call us back. For a moment, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity was so surreal, it almost felt like a joke. But I did call him back. Not for closure, not for curiosity. For clarity. The voice that answered was stiff, cautious. He congratulated me in a tone that sounded more like he was reading a script. Then, barely 3 minutes in, he pivoted. Your mother and I have had some challenges. Financial ones. We are trying to restore the old lake house. It needs work. We were wondering if you could help. There it was. 10 years of silence, and the first thing he said after congratulations was a request for money. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just listened. And then I asked, do you remember why you kicked me out? He hesitated. That was a long time ago. You were... No, I cut in. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't dishonest. I was telling the truth. And you chose her, every time. He deflected, told me the family had moved on, that Serena was married with 2 kids now, that things were different. So I made him an offer. If they wanted help, they had to earn it. I told him I'd pay for the lake house repairs, every cent, if they wrote a public letter addressed to our family and friends, admitting that Serena had lied, that they had wrongfully expelled me, that they allowed a narrative to destroy their son based on nothing but performance. He was silent. Then came the outrage. The disbelief, the old guilt tactics. You are being dramatic. Don't air dirty laundry. This is family. No, I said calmly. Aunt Clara is family. You are strangers. I hung up. They called again. And again. I didn't answer. Then came the email from Serena. Short, cold. She regretted some of her choices. She admitted to exaggerating a few things, but insisted I was still being childish and overly dramatic. Then she ended with a gem. I hope you find peace eventually. Unlike you, I have a full life now. Husband, kids, a real family. And that pushed something loose in me. For years I protected them with my silence. I told myself I didn't need to go public because I had moved on. But maybe silence wasn't healing. Maybe silence was hiding. So I sat down and wrote. I drafted a letter, not just to my parents, but to every extended family member, old friend, teacher, and neighbor who had ever believed their side. I laid it all out. The favoritism, the false accusations, the school meeting, the exile, the recovery, the film, Aunt Clara. I attached Serena's email, highlighted her admission, and I hit send. Not out of vengeance, but because the truth deserved daylight. The email didn't just land. It detonated. Within 24 hours, my inbox was a war zone. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade sent long, stunned apologies. Old neighbors messaged me, saying they were ashamed for ever believing the rumors. A retired teacher wrote, I always wondered why you stopped smiling. Even Clara's old bridge partner, who barely remembered my name, wrote me a card. But not everyone responded with remorse. My parents were furious. They didn't reply directly, of course not. Instead, they sent vague, passive-aggressive messages through relatives. Things like, we didn't raise him to be vindictive, or he is clearly still unstable. And Serena? She exploded. I woke up to a barrage of emails. Angry, cruel. She called me spiteful, accused me of manipulating people with trauma, and even had the nerve to suggest I was jealous of her functional adult life, as if marriage and kids were proof of moral superiority. She threatened to sue me for defamation. I didn't even flinch, because here's the thing about telling the truth, it frees you from fear. I didn't need to argue with them anymore. I didn't need to win a debate. I had facts, receipts, a decade's worth of silence turned into testimony. Still, their aggression wasn't something I could take lightly. So I hired a lawyer. She drafted a formal cease and desist letter, citing defamation, harassment, and emotional harm. We served it to both Serena and my parents. That stopped the messages cold. And suddenly, the noise was gone. In its place, something quiet and unexpected. Peace. Aunt Clara hugged me the day we sent the letter out. She didn't say much, just pressed her forehead to mine and whispered, you did what I never could. See, I wasn't the first in the family to be exiled for being different. Clara, too, had been branded difficult for choosing a life of color and chaos over conformity. But she never had the platform or the rage to fight back. I did. And I used it. Not just for me, but for every kid who's been called dramatic instead of abused, sensitive instead of neglected, rebellious instead of forgotten. I didn't need revenge. I just needed reality to be louder than the lies. That fall, I was invited to keynote an animation summit in Berlin. It was surreal. Thousands of creatives, animators, storytellers, producers gathered to talk about art and healing. I gave a talk called Drawing in the Dark. I shared the arc of my life, the silence, the sabotage, the rebuild. The standing ovation lasted 2 minutes. On the flight home, I stared out the window and thought, this is my life now. No more waiting for apologies. No more asking to be understood. I don't belong to the Petersons. I belong to myself. You know what's funny? After everything, I'm not angry anymore. Not because I have forgiven them, I haven't, but because I have stopped expecting different. It's real freedom when you stop holding your breath for the apology that will never come. My parents never reached out again after the cease and desist. Not a word, not a letter, no half-hearted holiday card, no cryptic Facebook message. It was like I never existed. And I'm okay with that. I no longer needed them to admit they were wrong, because the truth already did. My work, my life, stands as proof. My studio grew, quietly and steadily. I never wanted to go corporate, so I built a lean team, remote collaborators, creative control. We crafted visual stories for NGOs, indie filmmakers, trauma recovery centers. I even animated a children's short called The Lighthouse Boy, which was about a kid finding his way in the fog. It won a regional Emmy. Clara cried harder than I did. She is still my anchor. We talk weekly, see each other monthly, and collaborate whenever we can. Her paintings and my animations, 2 generations healing forward frame by frame. On the day of my 33rd birthday, she gave me a wrapped box. Inside, my vintage Les Paul guitar, the one my father had taken. I found it at a pawn shop, she said softly. Same serial number, same scuffed edge near the neck. I held it like it was an old friend I assumed dead. It wasn't just an instrument. It was a piece of me, a boy I used to be, finally coming home. I didn't post about it, didn't make a video, didn't turn it into content. Some moments aren't for the world. They're just for healing. As for Serena, last I heard, her picture-perfect life started to crack. Word got around, the truth I shared rippled. Some believed me, some didn't. But more importantly, she knew I was no longer afraid of her. She couldn't weaponize silence anymore. There's a strange kind of grief that comes with cutting ties, even when it's necessary. Some nights, I still think about what it might have been like if we had been raised differently. If we had grown together instead of apart. If my parents had loved both their children, not just the reflection that made them proud. But I never stay in that place too long. Because I have a life now. A good one. I wake up every day to do what I love. I work with people who see me. I mentor young artists who remind me of myself. I laugh louder, sleep easier, breathe deeper. And I never ever apologize for being too much again. Because I was never too much. They were just not enough.